Hello everyone, peace be upon you. Before we begin, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe, and stay with me until the end of the story. Also, leave a comment telling me which city and country you're watching from. I'd love to see how far my story has reached. For those of you who have already subscribed, I sincerely wish you good health, ease in all your affairs, abundant blessings, and may all your hopes and dreams come true. Amen. Now, let's begin the story. The hangar at Nellis Air Force Base was quiet at 0500. Tools clicked in distant bays, a compressor coughed awake, and the concrete floor reflected thin strips of white light. Caroline pushed a battered cleaning cart along the edge of Hangar 47 like she had every morning for 8 months. No one moved for her, they never did. She was the person who wiped fingerprints off glass and swept dust from under ladders. Invisible. Useful. Ignored. She climbed the ladder to the B-21 Raider prototype XF-72 and settled into the cockpit with a microfiber cloth in her right hand. Her motions were precise, almost rehearsed. She cleaned the HUD, the targeting display, the encrypted comms panel, pausing a second longer at each place a pilot's eyes would land in a critical moment. Habit, that was all it looked like. Habit and pride in quiet work. In the reflection on the canopy she caught her own face, calm, unreadable. The kind of face nobody remembers 2 minutes after walking past. Boot steps echoed. Ryan strolled in with a coffee and that weekend grin. "Morning, Ghost," he said, not looking. The nickname had started on day one and stuck because she never answered. He flicked the empty cup toward a bin, missed, and kept moving. A shrug from him, a steady hand from her guiding the cloth over the throttle quadrant. No reaction. Down on the floor, Dylan was stacking tool cases, grease on his knuckles and a safety badge clipped crooked to his shirt. He gave her a small nod like he always did, the only person in the room who seemed to notice she existed. She returned it with the slightest movement, then went back to the checklist that existed only in her head. At 0615 the hangar doors rolled wider. Natalie stepped in with a tablet tucked under her arm, helmet under the other. She scanned the jet, then the maintenance board, then the clock. She didn't scan Caroline. Few did. Pre-flight inspection at 0700, Natalie called to no one in particular. "Let's not slip today." Her tone was crisp, steady. Command without volume. Julia's voice came from the mezzanine, flat and focused. "Ops wants all birds green. Weather's clean to the north, mild thermal shear after 0900. She leaned over a console, headset around her neck, the glow from a diagnostic screen painting her face a tired green. She could track a blip through noise from 3 counties away, but right now she was tracking checkboxes. Then the footfall everyone noticed, General Robert Callahan with his staff trailing him by 2 paces. He didn't walk so much as carve a path through the air. "We're behind," he said, not checking whether that was true. He stopped at the wing route, glanced up at the cockpit, and frowned as if the presence of a cleaner near his jet was a kind of offense. "Make sure that glass is spotless. If a pilot scratches it with a glove buckle, I'll know why." He didn't wait for an answer. Caroline finished the panel, set the cloth, and slipped a hand into the side pocket of her coveralls. The worn photograph brushed her fingertips. She didn't pull it out. Not here. Not this morning. She climbed down, boots on rungs, the metal ladder ringing softly. At the bottom, she steadied the cart and moved around a coil of hoses that hadn't been there yesterday. Ryan laughed at something half funny he'd said to himself and bumped her shoulder on his way past. "Careful, Ghost," he tossed over his shoulder. His file on her, if he kept one in his head, had 3 words, quiet, harmless, background. Natalie stepped closer to the jet, checking seams and panels. "Dylan, who signed off on Bay 2, she asked without looking up. "Me," he said. "Torque spec verified." "Good," she said, and that was that. Tight ship, low drama. The kind of morning that turns into a forgettable afternoon. At 0740 Caroline pushed through the personnel door into the corridor that wrapped behind the hangar offices. The air smelled like cold coffee and printer toner. She emptied bins, wiped glass, and paused at a wall of framed photos, squadrons, promotions, ribbon clippings. Faces that the base remembered. Farther down, a bulletin board with base events, fun run signups, lost watch notice, mandatory training schedule. Things that make a place feel normal until the second it isn't. She reached the operations center around 0815 to clean the consoles before the rush. Rows of screens slept behind password locks. She sprayed a cloth, lifted a keyboard, and traced a slow line of motion that looked like nothing and meant everything. Julia stepped in, set down her coffee, and nodded in the direction of the radar wall. "We'll be busy later," she said, almost to herself. Then, to Caroline, a practical aside, watch the far console. The power strips loose. It was the longest sentence anyone had offered her all day. Callahan's voice drifted from an inner office, low and brisk. He was never alone, his words always had witnesses. "No slippage," he said. "If they can't keep schedule, I'll find someone who can." Different topic, same cadence. Caroline moved again. Hallway, admin, glass, bin, door. Facility Echo 12 ran on the other side of base roads and fences, underground and quiet. She'd been in its above-ground service entry twice a week, mop in hand and badge visible. No one remembers who cleans the corners of a secure doorframe. They just see the corner cleaned. Near noon, Natalie and Ryan crossed paths near the mezzanine. "You're still on the sim for Sierra drills?" she asked. "Yeah," he said. "Feels outdated." "Outdated is fine until it's not," she replied and kept walking. He rolled his eyes in a way he made sure she couldn't see. Caroline ate late, alone, at a small table in the mess, back to a wall, tray neat. The room was a low hum of fork taps and half-jokes. Ryan told a story loud enough for a second table to hear. Dylan grabbed a sandwich and a soda and hustled back out to make a parts drop. Julia scrolled a weather feed, brow pinched, and made notes with a blunt pencil. When the tray was clean, Caroline returned it, washed her hands longer than necessary, dried them carefully, and checked the time. 13:02, she crossed the tarmac again, sun higher, heat shimmer lifting off concrete. Hangar 47 looked almost serene, the jet asleep under lights that never fully turned off. She climbed the ladder one more time to finish the canopy edges. As she reached forward, the sleeve of her coveralls slid back half an inch. The inside lining showed a thin, dark stitch, nothing in ordinary I would read, everything to someone who knew what to look for. She felt the air change for a heartbeat and pulled the fabric down in a single smooth move. No hurry. No panic. Just done. From the floor, Natalie glanced up because she always glanced up. She saw only a cleaner's hand and an old cloth. She returned to the pre-flight board and checked off 3 more items. XF-72 ready by 1500, she said, not loudly, not softly. Just a fact. Callahan reappeared at the door with 2 aides. He scanned the hangar like a man counting assets. His gaze slid across Caroline and kept moving. "Brief at 1400, he said. "Don't be late." The aides nodded before he finished. He left the door swinging. Caroline climbed down, parked the cart, and pressed a finger to a small nick on the ladder's side rail, the kind of mark you notice only if you've used the same ladder every day for months. She wheeled the cart toward the far exit, the one that led to a corridor most people forgot about. At the threshold she stopped, just for a breath, and listened to the hangar, the steady beep of a charger, the clack of a socket wrench, the short laugh from Ryan, the subdued "copy" from Natalie on the radio. It sounded like order. It always did right before it didn't. She pushed through the door and the sound cut down to a hum. The hallway was cool and empty. Her footsteps fell in the middle of the tiles, straight line, steady rhythm. She passed a maintenance closet, a fire panel, a framed evacuation map with a fingerprint smudge on the glass she knew she'd remove later. She kept moving, rounded the corner, and paused at a service window that looked into a storage room stacked with sealed crates. She watched the red status LED blink. On. Off. On. Off. Nothing unusual. Not yet. Back in the hangar, Dylan's radio cracked softly with an ops update he only half heard. In the mezzanine, Julia set her coffee down and leaned closer to her monitor, not frowning, not smiling, just seeing. On the floor, Natalie signed her initials on a line and exhaled. Ryan spun a torque wrench just to feel the click. Caroline reached the outer door that led to the loading apron, sunlight angling across the threshold. She adjusted the strap of a small pouch on her cart, closed the clasp, and stepped into the light. The air smelled like hot aluminum and jet fuel. She didn't squint. She didn't hurry. She walked as the person everyone believed she was. And the base let her pass, like always. The heat met her first, then the wind, then the distant bark of a crew chief hustling a team toward a fuel truck. Caroline turned left, cutting behind a stack of pallets, and followed the apron's painted line toward the admin wing. Inside again, the air cooled and the lights hummed. She moved past a security desk where the sergeant never looked up from a clipboard, past 2 doors with card readers, and into the operations corridor that fed the command room. The floor felt steadier there, like decisions had weight. Julia was already at the radar wall when Caroline rolled her cart in. The big screen showed a wash of green and the steady pulse of their own transponders. Traffic to the south, training flights to the west, clean air to the north. Routine. Julia's pencil ticked a margin. Afternoon thermals forming early, she murmured. Could bounce signals. She didn't call it a problem. Not yet. At 1400 sharp, Callahan took the raised platform in the ops center. His aides flanked him, pens ready to capture orders as if orders might evaporate. Rapid response posture, he said. Night ops pending confirmation. Stay sharp. He nodded once and pivoted toward his office. The meeting was less a conversation than a tone setter. Everyone understood the tone. Caroline wiped the unused consoles along the back row. She didn't rush. She set a rhythm, spray, wipe, fold, move, that made her look exactly like what she was supposed to be. On the main screen, a faint echo blinked and faded. Julia leaned in. Ha! She adjusted gain, filtered noise, watched a second return paint, then stutter away. Possible ducting, she offered to the room. No one asked for more. At 1438 the echo returned, stronger, skirting the edge of controlled airspace, drifting along a line that looked careless and felt deliberate. Julia's voice dropped a half step. Unknown contact north by northeast, Angels 22, heading 047. She didn't turn, she never did when it mattered. Squawking nothing. Jamming noise rising. The room tightened. Callahan came back in with his jaw set. Spin up a pair, he said. Delta formation. Push it east. His orders landed like coins on a table. Natalie's voice hit the net from Hangar 47. Copy tasking. Crew on the move. Metal rang, boots hit tarmac, and the base stopped being ordinary. Ryan snagged his helmet and jogged a line he'd run 100 times in drills, but his breath came faster now. Dylan ripped a tarp from a service cart and waved a tow vehicle toward Bay 2. Let's go, he shouted, more to himself than anyone else. In ops, Caroline kept wiping. She didn't look up when the calm voice of a controller announced, Hunter flight, cleared to taxi. Hold short runway 21. She didn't look up when the unknown painted brighter and then smeared, the jamming rolling in like bad weather. She looked up when Callahan said, Delta 6. Drive it east. Keep our west clean. His eyes were flint. He wanted the shape to move where he told it to. Natalie came back cool as glass. Executing Delta 6. Ryan's breath hitched in his own mic, caught, leveled. Wheels bumped seams, jets turned, and the XF-72's shadow stretched long under the hangar lights. Caroline's cloth traced a slow circle on a dark screen's bezel, then stopped. Her other hand settled lightly on the cart's handle, as if a bit of balance might tip the room. Air control counted down the merge. Visual in 10, 8, 5. Ryan whispered, "Contact," like he'd never seen anything quite like it. Natalie didn't whisper. Hostile maneuvers erratic, high alpha, inverted cobra. Jamming spike concurrent. Julia's hand hovered over a dial and didn't touch it. Her eyes stayed on the sweep. Return faded, "No, it's there, no, it's gone." Callahan didn't blink. Maintain. Force east. He said it like physics took orders. Caroline eased the cart back a fraction and slid between two chairs, giving a clear path no one needed, then angled toward the corridor. In the doorway she paused, long enough to hear the room's sound change from busy to brittle. Silence, then stepping, then a chair scraping. She continued down the hall, past the glass of Callahan's office that reflected his own face back at him. He lifted a secure handset, turned his shoulder, and let the door sit 1 inch open. His voice came flat. Pattern matches midnight Sunday, move the timetable. Echo, 12 goes tonight. The handset clicked. He stood still for half a beat, then set it down like it weighed more than it had. Caroline kept walking. Storage room. Mop sink. Emergency exit map. She knew each by heart. At a maintenance hatch she stopped, slipped a gloved finger under the lip, felt the familiar roughness of the panel's paint, and let it go. She didn't need to look. She needed time to settle into its groove. Back in ops, the unknown contact vanished, leaving a hole in the sweep where it should have been. Lost it, Julia said, neutral. No system faults. Heads turned. No one exhaled. Callahan's knuckles went white on the platform rail. RTB, he said finally. Diagnostics on every receiver. I want a report in 20. He didn't look at Julia when he said it. The room decompressed in shuffles and murmurs. Ryan's voice over the net tried a joke and died mid-sentence. Natalie's tone didn't change. Copy RTB. Wheels kissed runway, engines spooled down, crews rolled stairs, and the base pretended to be normal again. On a different day it might have succeeded. Caroline finished the last console and pushed the cart out. The corridor smelled like dust, colder now. She turned left toward admin, past a framed mission patch she'd never touched, and pushed through a door into the mess where the noise came condensed, trays, silverware, low voices coiled around words like impossible and never seen. Ryan sat with two pilots, hands drawing shapes in the air. It curved up and just hung there, he said. Like the air was thicker for them. Natalie ate quickly, head down, tablet beside her, not isolating herself so much as reducing friction. At their table's edge, Caroline wiped a ring of coffee someone had left. The cloth slid, caught, lifted. A chair leg nudged her sleeve as a captain stood without seeing her. The cuff pulled back a fraction. The smallest shadow of a black insignia hid where no badge checker would ever search. Natalie looked up reflexively, eyes flashing to motion, then past it as if the brain refused what it couldn't frame. By the time the thought formed, the sleeve was smooth, the cuff straight, the cleaner gone. Dylan hustled in, grabbed a soda, and almost ran into her on the way out. Sorry, he said, breathless. She shifted just enough for him to pass. His apology hung in the air a second longer than usual, then faded like all the others she'd been offered in that room. Evening slid across the valley. Shadows in Hangar 47 grew long and thin, pointing toward the jet like arrows. The brief came down for night alert. Natalie checked her list again, then again, because that's how she built the habit of surviving. Ryan stretched his neck and told himself to stop replaying the maneuver he couldn't track. Julia adjusted thresholds on her console, eyes dry, attention sharper than hunger. Caroline's badge beeped her into the admin wing. Callahan's office door was shut now, blinds tilted. Voices moved on the other side, his and another, lower, too careful. She didn't slow. She reached the custodial closet, set the cart inside, and closed the door. The click sounded like any other click. In the dark, she slid a false panel back by feel, found a compact device cradled in foam, and pressed a single recessed switch. A green LED glowed once, then dimmed. The channel came alive in her ear, tight and encrypted. Her voice shed the weight of silence and landed solid in the space. Mockingbird to Nest, she said, each word level. Package movement confirmed for Echo 12 tonight. Command complicit. Request Phase 2 authorization. The reply was immediate, filtered through the kind of security no one in that building would admit existed. Nest copies. Phase 2 authorized. Asset standing by. Good hunting. She powered down, returned the device, and slid the panel shut until the magnets kissed. When she opened the closet door, the world returned to its usual shape. Fluorescence. Footprints. The quiet rattle of an air vent. Outside, the desert wind had picked up, a dry hiss along the hangar skin. Night crews moved with red-lensed flashlights and whispers that carried farther than they meant them to. Natalie's voice touched the net, final checks. Wheels up on my mark. Ryan answered, steadier now, the earlier edge filed down by purpose. Dylan jogged a cable across the floor and taped it flat so no one would trip in the rush. Caroline crossed the hangar threshold one more time that day and let the night air settle over her. She looked at the XF-72, sleek, black, impossible in the way all new things look impossible until they're ordinary. She watched Natalie put a hand on the ladder rail and draw a breath before climbing. She watched Ryan tap the side of his helmet twice for luck. She watched Dylan glance at her by accident and then look away, embarrassed by a habit of kindness. The PA clicked. All stations, stand by. A second voice layered on top, lower, older. This is General Callahan. We are executing a limited night intercept. Standard protocols apply. He didn't say why. He didn't say because. He didn't have to. Caroline stepped into the shadow of Bay 3 and adjusted the strap of her coveralls. The facility beyond the fence, Echo 12, sat under a skin of dirt and concrete, quiet to anyone who hadn't memorized its breathing. She had. The timetable had moved. The board was set. The only thing left was to flip it. Somewhere behind her, a radio popped with static and then cleared. Runway 21, cleared for immediate. Engines surged, air trembled, and the jet rolled. Caroline didn't watch it lift. She turned toward the service road that led away from the light, toward the place where a door would open if you knocked the right way. She walked like she always walked. And the base let her pass, again. Only this time, the night knew her name. Caroline cut across the service road where the floodlights faded into desert dark and followed the chain-link fence until the ground dipped toward the utility tunnel mouth. The lock on the small gate gave it a practiced pressure. She stepped inside the concrete throat of the base, the air cooler and tasting faintly of dust and machine oil. Her boots made soft sounds, swallowed by the hum of fans. She didn't hurry. She moved like a person who belonged wherever she stood. Over the net, Natalie's voice stayed level. Phantom element, hold spacing. We'll test their jamming on the edge and see if they blink. Ryan answered, tight but controlled, copy. The XF-72's engines pulled a higher note as it climbed, the kind you feel in your ribs if you're close enough to metal. Julia tracked the returns in ops, eyes on the sweep, fingers steady on a gain knob. Contact north-northeast, 5 bandits probable, jamming high. Secondary noise floor rising. She didn't raise her volume. The room leaned in anyway. Caroline reached an unmarked door painted the same indifferent gray as the wall and keyed in a sequence that wasn't on any custodial memo. The latch released. Facility Echo 12 didn't look like anything dramatic. Short corridor. Carded inner hatch. Bare concrete. It was the plain face of secrets that didn't care if you recognized them. She slid a second keycard from a sleeve seam and gave the reader its kiss. The inner door clicked. Inside, the world sharpened. Crates with stenciled codes sat on low rollers. Cables snaked to a monitoring rack with a flat line of green LEDs. A clock on the far wall read 21:07. A man in a duty shirt turned at the sound of the door and froze halfway between suspicion and a shrug a cleaner always got. Before he could decide which way to go, Major Ethan Whitfield stepped out from behind a crate and saved him the trouble. "You're late," he told the room like it was a person, then saw Caroline and added a curl of contempt. "And of course they send the mop at shift change." She rolled the cart 2 feet forward and set the brake. "You should tape your boxes better," she said, eyes flicking to a corner where a crate's lid sat a fraction off square. Whitfield didn't look. He was busy rearranging 2 guards with his voice. "Stay on the door. No one in or out unless they're on my list. Callahan wants no hiccups." He said the name like armor. Up top, the sky held 3 pinpricks that weren't stars. Natalie's breathing didn't change when she called her turn. "Sierra 7 on my mark." Ryan said, "Sierra what now?" because humor is where panic goes when it's trying to live. "Mark," Natalie said, and the formation flexed into a shape they didn't teach anymore, the kind that makes someone confident rush the wrong gap. 2 bandits took it. The trap closed. One hostile broke left trailing flame, the second hung for a blink then dropped like a punched elevator. 2 splash, Julia reported, neutral. 3 remaining. Caroline held Whitfield's gaze long enough to file the angle of his arrogance. Then she glanced past him to the monitoring rack. 4 modules. 2 active. 1 blinking fault light that didn't line up with the log sheet clipped to the side. She made a quiet map in her head, boxes, guards, distance to the alarm pull, distance to the secondary door, camera cone, Whitfield's draw hand. He kept the holster unbuttoned like a guy who believed the badge made him faster. "Door," 1 guard said, and the outer hatch cracked. 2 men in coveralls edged a crate through on rollers, feet shuffling to manage the weight. They weren't Echo personnel. Their posture was wrong. Their eyes kept moving like the corners might grow teeth. Whitfield's mouth thinned. "You're late." One of them said, "Traffic," and didn't mean cars. Whitfield checked his watch and then the clock he could see from where he stood. "Let's move." In ops, Callahan stood at the rail with his hands behind his back, chin lifted, a statue made of brass and rank. "Push them east," he told no one in particular. "Keep our west clean." Julia's pencil made a small mark in the margin where only she would see it. "They're not taking the bait," she said. 2 breaking south. Natalie, copy. Adjusting. Ryan, I've got the leader. Wait, he's bleeding speed then. No, he's on me. Correction on me. He didn't panic. He swallowed and recalculated. Caroline moved 1 step, then 2, not toward the crate parade but toward the fire control box mounted high on the wall. She reached up like a person checking dust and noted the security seal, intact and fresh. "Good." Her hand came back down slow. Whitfield cut his eyes at her. "Do not touch anything that isn't dirt," he said, and turned to the guards. "Once these are loaded, we roll to the north service ramp. No delays." He set his palm on the lid of the nearest crate as if contact made it his. The stencil read, "Targeting interface, Rev A, authorized handling only." The tape line had been cut clean and resealed. The edges didn't match. It was an insult to anyone who cared about craft. The outer door whispered again. A new figure filled the frame. General Callahan stepped inside without looking around, as if rooms arranged themselves to his angles. "We are behind," he said, because saying it out loud made it the other guy's fault. He gave Whitfield a stare that could have scraped paint. "Fix it." To Caroline, he gave nothing. She didn't exist at his altitude. "We roll in 15, he said, then paused with his head tilted, listening to a voice in his earpiece. "Make it 10. He pivoted, and the voice of the bass followed him out like a dog that only obeyed one owner. Above ground, the fight compressed. Jamming rose like a wall and then split to threads. Natalie's tone gained an edge you could shave with. "Abandon Delta. New plan. Throttle brake on my 3, then vertical scissors. Ryan, do not chase bait." "Copy not chasing," he said, already wanting to. "Julia, confirm third contact south-southwest." "Confirmed," she said, "but returns dirty." "Clean enough." Natalie rolled, pulled, and the XF-72 wrote its own law on the night. A hostile overshot and appeared in Ryan's windscreen like a mistake that had grown teeth. He blinked once, lifted, and the mistake went past. Caroline exhaled through her nose and reached for the handle on her cart. Her fingers closed on the metal. The weight grounded her. She looked at the floor just long enough to confirm the small wedge under the back wheel was still in place. Then she straightened, took 2 steps to the alarm pull, and paused. Time did what it always does around a decision, it elongated and thinned until the second bent. She didn't pull it. Instead, she spoke to the air the way a person speaks when they've already written the aftermath. "Major," she said, "level." Whitfield turned, impatience already loaded. "What?" She nodded at the monitoring rack. "Your Module 3 is out of spec." He snorted. "Cleaners don't read spec." "No," she said, and let the sentence hang. He walked to the rack, because ego moves faster than caution. He leaned in to see which light she meant. "Now," Caroline said, not loud, not soft, into the quiet wire in her ear. The lock on the secondary door thumped open behind the crate stack. 2 shadows slid in low, fast, quiet. They wore the kind of black that makes cameras lie. Whitfield didn't hear them because his narrative was still about proving a point to a woman with a rag. The nearest guard did hear something and turned and saw a shape where a wall should have been. He reached for metal. He got empty air. The shadow moved his wrist to the wrong angle and the weapon clattered. The other shadow flowed around the end of the crate and put a hand on the second guard's shoulder like a friend before introducing the floor to his face. Whitfield spun and got his hand on leather. Caroline was already between him and the rest of the room. The distance was not big. Her draw was not dramatic. It was efficient. The sound of her slide made 3 truths: she wasn't a cleaner, she was faster, and she had given him his last out by speaking first. He didn't take it. His thumb hit the strap. His knuckles lifted. Her weapon leveled. "Don't," she said, and he stopped, muscle memory losing to math. Callahan's voice cracked over the base net. "Report, Echo 12. No one in the room answered. He tried again. "Whitfield, status." Caroline didn't smile. "Busy," she said, and Whitfield flinched like he'd been struck because he recognized the voice he'd never expect to hear coming from a coverall. "Up in ops," Julia's pencil stopped. "I have ground alarm indicators at Echo 12, she said. No, she had something that smelled like an alarm if you knew the building's breath. Correction, door state changed. Multiple. Callahan's head snapped. "Seal it," he said. "Lock that facility down." "Access override requires 2-factor, Julia replied. She didn't look at him. She looked at the screen because screens don't flinch. On the runway, the XF-72 leveled into a shallow dive and Natalie pressed the advantage. "Brake right, Ryan. I've got him." The hostile tried the same magic trick as before, the one that had made Ryan's brain stick in his skull. It didn't work this time. Natalie's angle held, the jet did something that would make a physics teacher ask to sit down, and the bandit made a new star near the ridge line. Splash 3, Julia said, the number low and mean. 2 remaining. In Echo 12, the shadows moved like they'd paid rent. One secured the nearest guard with a smoothness that looked like a well-made machine. The other eased a lid off a crate and photographed the interface module inside, the one someone had been willing to sell for more than a pension. Caroline kept Whitfield's eyes on her and not on the fact that his plan was bleeding out through details he hadn't valued. He swallowed, found his voice, and went for the only leverage left. You don't know who you're crossing, he said. You don't know how far this goes. She held his gaze. I know exactly how far it goes. It wasn't a boast. It was an inventory. Callahan stormed toward the ops exit, 2 aides in his wake. With me, he snapped, and the hallway lights flickered like even the building didn't love his pace. Julia watched his back as he left and then looked at the radar again because the sky was still trying to kill her pilots. Natalie, Bandit 2 climbing, Bandit 4 low and fast toward west perimeter, possible diversion south. Copy, Natalie said. Ryan, take high cover. I'm on the climber. On it, he replied, and this time he was. Caroline's earpiece clicked twice, Nest telling her a package had landed in a place Callahan didn't control. She kept her weapon level and her tone human. Ethan, she said, dropping the rank because it no longer applied. Hands where I can see them. We're done here. He weighed his options and found them light. His hands rose, palms out, the fight leaving his shoulders in degrees. The shadows closed and made it official with a plastic sound that carries a different kind of authority than a salute. From the doorway behind her, a new voice cut the room. Colonel, Natalie said, breath quick from a sprint, helmet under her arm, eyes taking in the whole picture in one sweep. The word landed and rearranged the air. Ryan slid in behind her, flushed, wide-eyed, seeing a cleaner and a weapon and a reality check in one frame. Dylan hovered 2 steps back, shock open on his face and respect arriving behind it. Julia's voice crackled over a wall speaker, unaware of the tableau. Echo 12, report, she said, and then added, Natalie, remaining bandits veering off north. They're bugging out. The room in Echo 12 held its breath, and in the hangar above them, the base exhaled for the first time that night. The sound didn't last. Footsteps hammered the corridor outside Echo 12, a barked order snapped, and the inner door jolted against its stops. Callahan shoved through with 2 security men at his shoulders, rage riding tight on his face. He took in the crate lids, the secured guards, Whitfield's hands in the air, the black-clad operators melting into corners that cameras pretended were shadows, and then he saw Caroline. Not the cart, not the rag. The stance, the weapon, the authority that didn't ask permission. Something in his expression cracked and went flat. You, he said, like an accusation aimed at the universe. Stand down. It wasn't a request. Caroline didn't move. General, this facility is now under an active intelligence seizure, she said, voice low, even. You will relinquish control and submit to detainment pending charges. The words reshaped the room. Natalie held the doorway without blinking. Ryan slid his shoulder to the frame, hands open, reading the angles for where panic might jump. Dylan hovered behind them, caught between awe and the instinct to grab a wrench and fix the whole situation like it was a machine. Callahan's jaw worked. Lieutenant, he snapped past Caroline, reaching for chain of command he expected to still obey him. Arrest this impersonator. That's an order. Natalie didn't flinch. Negative, sir, she said, each syllable a dull bell. Standing by the colonel. The title hung in the fluorescent hum. Ryan swallowed and found his voice. Standing by, he added, quieter, but it carried. Whitfield chose that second to remember he had a mouth. General, he started, and Caroline's eyes cut to him. Be silent, she said, not loud, and he obeyed out of reflex before he realized he had. The two black-clad operators shifted, not threatening, just present in a way that made threats unnecessary. One lifted a secure pouch with the photos inside, the other pointed a chin toward the rack of blinking modules. Evidence breathed in that room like a second HVAC. Julia's voice ghosted in over a wall speaker from Ops. Bandits are off scope. No re-entry. We're green in the air. Ground, status. The question landed in everyone's ears at the same time. Callahan took half a step forward. Whitfield, secure this. He stopped when a cold click sounded near his hip. Natalie had rested her palm on her holster's snap, not drawn, but not decorative. Caroline lifted her chin a millimeter. Robert Callahan, she said, using the name like you use a lever. You are under arrest for treason, weapons trafficking, and conspiracy. She didn't read him rights. This wasn't a beat cop on a street corner. This was a commander reclaiming a field. He laughed, short, hard, brittle enough to cut. You think you have jurisdiction here? He flicked a glance at the cameras, at the guards, at the ceiling like larger eyes might be watching. You have no idea who you're touching. Caroline's answer didn't change volume. I know exactly who I'm touching, and who you're shielding. Hands where I can see them. Her weapon didn't waver. Her voice stayed human. That combination did what shouting never does. Callahan lifted his hands, palms forward, a performance for later arguments. Boots skidded at the door. Two base security NCOs appeared, eyes wide, weapons low, caught somewhere between orders and reality. Natalie addressed them without moving her feet. Sergeants, on my authority as acting flight lead and by direction of military intelligence on scene, you will secure General Callahan and Major Whitfield for transport to holding. Use standard restraint. The sergeants exchanged a look and then looked at Caroline like they were measuring the weather by the ocean's smell. They moved. Plastic bites clicked. Whitfield's face drained. Callahan didn't struggle. He stared at Caroline as if staring could draft a different outcome. Over the net, Julia finally heard the echo of voices and keyed live. Colonel, she said, cautious, testing the shape of the word in her mouth. Ops requires a name for the log. Caroline didn't break eye contact with Callahan. River, she said. For a beat the room forgot the air. Natalie exhaled like the word rebuilt a spine she hadn't known she'd been holding crooked. Ryan muttered, no way, to no one. Dylan's eyes widened and then steadied, landing on respect as if it were a tool he'd been reaching for in the dark. From the corner, one operator passed Caroline a slim device. She thumbed it, a secure channel opened with a soft, affirmative tone. Mockingbird to nest, she said. Primary actors detained. Package samples documented. Air picture green. Request authority to assume command of Nellis AFB for incident containment. The reply was immediate, a voice like gravel under velvet. Nest to Mockingbird. Authority granted. Command code follows. A code spilled through the channel, muscle memory catching each digit. She repeated it back, eyes never leaving the room. Callahan took his shot then, not with a gun, but with words meant to shatter from the inside. You disappeared in a fire because your idealism got people killed, he said softly enough that only the nearest heard it. And now you'll burn a base to prove you were right. Caroline's eyelids didn't flicker. 6 names, she said, equally soft. I remember every one. That's why I'm here. She nodded to the sergeants. Remove them. They moved Callahan and Whitfield through the door. The hall swallowed boots and anger. Noise flowed back in, fans, distant clank, the metallic scuff of a crate being reseated. Caroline holstered, then pulled a folded badge from inside her coveralls and clipped it where it should have always been. The small, matte insignia above it caught the light for the first time in that room. Phantom's mark, Black Hawk ringed by stars. Natalie's eyes tracked it like a compass finding north. Colonel, Julia said over the speaker, voice steadier now, requesting directives. We still have unexplained signatures in earlier tracks. If tonight was a pickup, there's a plan B. Caroline nodded once to the air. We treat it like there's a plan B and C. She turned to Natalie. You have the deck in the air. Fuel, rearm, ready pairs on 5 minutes. No heroics. We hold the perimeter and force them to show us their next move. Copy, Natalie said, already moving without leaving. Ryan, Caroline said, finally letting his name land on him. He straightened like a string had been pulled. You're on high cover and you're glued to Natalie's wing unless she pries you off with a crowbar. You see something you don't understand, you call it, you do not chase it. The corner of his mouth twitched. Copy, no chasing, he said, and this time the joke landed with a purpose. Dylan, she added, and he snapped to attention the way a kid does when a teacher finally says his name for the right reasons. I need Bay 2's remotes checked, and I want hard eyes on every tow vehicle manifest from 1800. If a single unit went somewhere it shouldn't, I want the line, the driver, and the gas receipt. On it, he said, already planning how to tear apart a paper trail with a socket set. She faced the operators. You two shadow the chain of custody on those modules. Nothing leaves this room without the camera seeing it and Julia logging it. A thumb up, a nod. They were already 2 moves ahead. Caroline stepped into the hall and the base seemed to tilt with her. The presence of command is less about volume than gravity. People looked up from screens and screens looked back with new purpose. In ops, she climbed the platform. The rail felt familiar under her palm. Julia met her eyes. No salute. Something older and tighter. Ma'am, she said. Logs backfilled. I've tagged every anomaly since 0600. We have 3 anomalies that aren't explained by weather or training flights. She tapped the wall, blooms of data expanding. Vectors point to a box north of the range. Nothing there that belongs to us. Caroline scanned, fast and clean. Spoofed comms. Possible, Julia said. But the timing suggests external queuing. Caroline turned the board with her mind. Then somebody offsite is telling them when to knock. We find the knocker. A junior controller half rose as if to salute and then thought better of it. Colonel, command authority confirmation just hit from. He didn't finish because the action code scrolled across his console like a permission slip from God. He swallowed. Confirmed. That settled the last dust motes of doubt. Patch me base wide, Caroline said. The controller's hand found the switch. She didn't raise her voice when the net opened to every ear under that sky. This is Colonel Caroline Hayes, she said, and hearing her name in her own mouth sent a small current through the room. Effective immediately, I am assuming command of Nellis Air Force Base for the duration of this incident. All personnel will continue duty under existing roles until relieved. You will treat Echo 12 as a sealed site. If you are not explicitly granted entry, you do not approach. We are not a target tonight. We are the wall. Hold it. The channel clicked closed. A quiet traveled outward like heat leaving a stone. Natalie's copy came first, crisp. Ryan's followed, younger but anchoring. Dylan didn't have a mic, he answered by making things work. Out on the apron, crews moved faster without rushing, the difference between panic and pace. Callahan's removal didn't end the night. It cleared the board. Every time a corrupt command post falls, the network above it tries to reach down and stitch it back together. That stitching is noisy if you know what to listen for. Julia knew. A blip, faint, wrong, touched the edge of her map. Colonel, she said quietly. You'll want to see this. A thin, off-grid signal blinked 3 times, paused, blinked twice. Not a transponder. A metronome for ghosts. Origin? Caroline asked. Somewhere east of the dry lake, Julia replied. Could be a decoy beacon. Or a shepherd light, Caroline said. They're telling someone where the flock is. She looked at the range overlay. Natalie, we have a ping east of the dry lake. Investigate with caution. If it's a lure, I want eyes not teeth. Understood, Natalie said, and you could hear the smile that wasn't about happiness, about fitting into a groove that finally had the right shape. Ryan's voice slid in, calmer than his age. Colonel, permission to speak. Granted. Earlier, when they disappeared, it felt like they were riding our blind spots. If that beacon's real, they want us to overcommit east while they hit the North Service Road for a ground snatch. He waited for the slap. It didn't come. Caroline nodded once, even though he couldn't see it. Good catch. Julia, double watch the north. Dylan, get eyes on every gate camera from the last 10 minutes. Already scrubbing, Dylan said through Natalie's mic, breathless, excited in the way work can be when it's also meaning. A new voice crackled at the ops entrance. Military police, the captain said, crisp, his men lined up behind him. He'd heard the base wide. He'd also heard the name. Colonel, holding cells prepped. Prisoner Callahan secured. Whitfield en route. He hesitated a fraction. Ma'am, we have external counsel on the line requesting to speak on the general's behalf. Caroline didn't sigh. They can hold, she said. Indefinitely. She turned back to the board. Desert nights carry sound, but they also carry intention. Somewhere beyond the fence, someone else was tightening a plan that had relied on arrogance and routine. Routine had left the building. She set her hand on the rail again, felt the vibration of air conditioners, electronics, the blood of a base settling into a different heart rate. Julia, she said, light up the dry lake and starve the north. I want illumination for the lure and shadows for the road. Natalie, orbit the beacon, weapons cold unless fired upon. Ryan, be wide eyes. If they flicker, you see it. Everyone else, drink water, check your gear, fix what's loose. We're not done. The base listened like a living thing. Somewhere in Echo 12, a camera's red LED blinked a steady heartbeat. On the runway, a crew chief patted a fuselage twice for luck. In a dark office, a phone blinked angrily into an empty chair. The night had learned her name. Now it was going to learn her rules. Caroline kept one palm on the ops rail and let the bass settle into her cadence. Julia, push illumination on the dry lake. Keep the north corridor dark. A bank of flood towers surged on the east side of the range, washing the beacon's box in flat white. The North Service Road fell 2 shades deeper into night. Natalie, orbit the lure and hold cold, Caroline said. Ryan, high cover. Call anything that twitches. Copy, Natalie replied. On station. Ryan added, eyes wide. No chasing. The first test came fast. A van's thermal signature winked in at the edge of Julia's map, no transponder, hugging the north fence like a shadow with wheels. Vehicle north, low speed, lights out, Julia reported. Dylan's voice cut in on the local net from Hangar 47. Pulling gate cams now, got it. North Service Gate showed a badge access 30 minutes ago, no vehicle on the log. Caroline didn't need the rest. Military police, intercept North Service Road, she ordered. Silent approach. Don't spook them into the desert. The MP captain answered from outside ops. Copy. Rolling quiet. Over the lake, Natalie held her circle, reading the lure without touching it. The beacon flashed its pattern again, 3 short, 2 long, like a metronome meant for someone else. Colonel, that light wants an audience, she said. It's not for us. Exactly, Caroline said. We'll clap at the end. Julia deepened the contrast on her screen and found a second thread in the noise, brief, wrong, moving against expectation. New heat bloom cutting south to north inside the fence, she said. Size of a bike. Could be a drone on wheels. Ryan tightened his arc, visual on small mover north. Holding high. Caroline pivoted orders like screws. Dylan, get me a maintenance cart with a thermal blanket staged at Gate Bravo. If they run, I want a trap that looks like trash. On it, he said, already waving two crewmen toward a tarp and an old cart. MP trucks ghosted up the road in infrared quiet. The van ahead slowed for the little dip before the gate, then rolled again. The captain counted under his breath and held the pounce until the road narrowed between two barriers. Now, he said. Trucks slid, lights hit full, doors flew. Freeze. Hands up. The van's engine revved and died. Two silhouettes chose bad math and went for the fence. The third lifted his hand so fast he almost threw a shoulder. Plastic cuffs answered. In ops, Julia tagged the stop with a calm, north intercept achieved, then added, we have movement west of Echo perimeter, small target accelerating. Caroline didn't waste motion. Dylan. He was already there, breath quick in Natalie's mic, cart staged. Throwing the blanket now. The little drone bike shot under the fence gap like a rat, nose pointed for the road. It hit the corner where Dylan had left the cart and saw what it likely thought was a pile of junk. It veered to miss, met the tarp edge, and vanished under canvas and steel. Dylan landed on it with both knees and a length of tie-down. Gotcha, he grunted. Another crewman dropped his weight and the drone's wheel spun in place with a dry whine. Device contained, Dylan huffed. Transmitting a photo. Julia's screen lit with the image, a compact courier platform and a foam-lined base sized for a module. They were going to drive the interface out under our noses, she said. Not tonight, Caroline answered. At the dry lake, Natalie let the beacon blink one more time, then eased lower. Julia, source. Power looks local, Julia said. Buried cable from an old range box. Someone piggybacked the line. Copy, Natalie said. She snapped a photo pass and climbed back to her orbit. We can kill it later, Caroline said. Right now it's bait we control. The MP captain's voice returned, wind in his mic, Colonel, 3 in custody from the van. 2 tried to run, 1's talking already. Says he was told to follow the blink pattern to the pickup. He doesn't know who lit it. He knows enough, Caroline said. Process them. Separate rooms. No comms. She looked at Julia. Any chatter? Encrypted bursts east of the range, then silence, Julia said. If they had a plan C, it choked when the van did. In Echo 12, the operators finished their sweep and sealed the crates with custody tags that would read like DNA in court. Ryan jogged down the corridor outside ops and stopped at the threshold, helmet under his arm, trying to match the cleaner in his memory with the colonel on the platform. Ma'am, he said, choosing the safe word. Request debrief on those maneuvers when we're green. You'll get it, Caroline said. Then you'll fly it until you can do it with your eyes closed and your mouth shut. He nodded, a little sheepish. Copy, mouth shut. Natalie stepped into ops a minute later, helmet tucked tight, sweat dark at her collar, eyes bright not from adrenaline but from alignment. Perimeter quiet. Fuel crews spinning. Caroline held her gaze a beat. Good work, she said. Praise was currency. She didn't spend it often. Natalie cashed it without a word. The door opened again. The MP captain offered a brief salute. Callahan's in holding. He asked for a phone. We advised him policy. Policy is fine, Caroline said. He can speak when legal is present and recording runs. The captain hesitated. He asked who signed the authority. Tell him, Caroline said. Me. She shifted the base from acute to contained. Julia, archive everything from 1600, raw, processed, and your notes. Flag the beacon footage. Backups off network. Already duplicating, Julia said. 2 drives. 1 sealed here, 1 with you. Good, Caroline replied. Dylan, inventory every tool that moved through Echo 12 in the last 72 hours. If a wrench went missing, I want to know who signed the sheet. Copy, Dylan said. I'll match ink and oil. She keyed the secure line again. Mockingbird to Nest. Site stable. Primary conspirator detained. Secondary transport interdicted. Request guidance on custody transfer and public affairs cover. The voice came back measured. Nest to Mockingbird. Bravo Zulu. MPs hold local. Federal team wheels up. Cover remains, routine systems test and training. You'll get a line if press calls. Understood, she said, then added, recommend we scrub the beacon feed and pull the piggyback line tonight. Approved, Nest said. Also, good to have you back on net, Colonel. The channel clicked and left the room a notch warmer. The hours that follow a crisis are heavy. Paper multiplies. People remember they are thirsty. Muscles notice the work. Caroline walked the loop once, Echo, holding, Hanger, Ops, pausing just long enough in each to make sure posture had replaced panic. She stopped at the holding corridor's window and looked in at Callahan. He sat straight, hands folded, eyes clear. He met her glance with a flat patience that said he practiced it. She didn't speak. He didn't either. Glass is good at silence. Back in Ops, Julia handed over 2 drives and a thin print packet. My anomalies list, she said. 3 still unexplained. I think they're dead ends, but I won't swear it. Don't, Caroline said. We'll swear later. Natalie leaned against the rail 2 feet away, not intruding, just within earshot in case the next plan arrived early. Ryan slumped into a chair and forced himself upright a second later, embarrassed at the body's truth. Dylan sent a photo of the drone's tag to Julia, who tagged it to the custody chain before the pixels were dry. Caroline let the room breathe. Listen up, she said, not loud. We're going to close this without drama. We'll log, we'll sleep in shifts, we'll keep the lights where we want them. Tomorrow we'll brief. When people ask you what happened, you'll say, routine systems test and training. That's the truth they're allowed to have. The rest is for the record. Heads nodded. No one argued. Near dawn, the dry lake beacon blinked its pattern one last time before the power cut and it went dark. A maintenance team, one of the operators and Dylan in a borrowed cap, pulled the piggyback line and sealed the junction box with a new tag and a new photograph. On the north road, the van sat under a tarp, 4 cones around it, evidence stickers on the seams. Echo 12's door had a different sound when it closed, a heavier thunk that meant the room had changed owners. Caroline stepped outside as first light scraped the ridge. The flight line looked different in that color, less sharp, more honest. Natalie stood a few yards away, helmet dangling, watching the sky for no operational reason. Ma'am, she said. You going to stay on the line? Caroline watched a fuel truck move like a slow animal. Long enough to finish the paperwork, she said. They both knew paperwork meant fallout, reports, hearings, names on pages that would matter later. Ryan came up with 2 coffees he'd clearly not brewed. He offered one with the earnestness of a person who wanted to be better than he'd been yesterday. Caroline took it, sipped, and failed to hide the face. He grinned, sheepish. It's terrible, he said. But it's a start. That's true, she said, and passed the cup back. Inside, the base PA clicked and gave them the same line it always did at shift change. Crews rotated. Screens dimmed then brightened. People who'd been invisible all night pushed brooms and turned wrenches and made a machine into a place again. The crisis hadn't given them names, but it had given them something else, attention paid, even for a minute. Julia walked over with a final update. External team inbound, she said. 90 minutes. Caroline nodded. We'll hold the wall until then. She looked around one more time, Hangar 47, the rail, the faces that had moved from routine to resolve. The night had learned her rules. The day would learn the rest. Sun climbs the ridge slow and plain, washing the flight line in a flat gold that exposes everything people tried to ignore in the dark. Caroline signs 2 custody forms at the ops rail, initials 3 photos, and hands Julia the packet for duplication. Chain verified, Julia says, steady, already routing the copy to the safe. The base moves on its morning track, forklifts hum, a fuel truck coughs, a weather balloon drifts up past the tower, and yet everyone steps a little lighter, like the floor has stopped tilting under their boots. Military police rotate fresh guards onto the holding corridor. Through the glass, Callahan sits with blazer off and posture perfect, eyes dry, waiting for a call that will not come. Whitfield stares at the table like it owes him something. Caroline doesn't stop. She has the shape of the day in her head and it's not about them anymore. External investigators arrive 90 minutes later in an unmarked transport with a quiet team and louder paperwork. No ceremony, no headlines, just badges, cases, and an efficient pace. The lead agent meets Caroline at the ops platform, offers a professional nod. We'll take custody and file immediate holds, he says. You've documented well. She hands him the sealed drive and the signed log. Echo 12 is sealed with dual control, she says. Modules tagged, photos logged, video saved. He reads the tag list and glances up. You ran this like you never left. I didn't, she answers, and that ends small talk. Transfer happens in 3 clean moves: prisoners, evidence, incident copies. The team disperses like a solvent into the base's seams, asking short questions, gathering signatures, following the chain that was denied the night before. Natalie observes from the rail with the calm of someone who knows where her job starts and ends. Ryan hovers 2 steps back, learning how quiet authority looks when it's wearing a clipboard instead of a helmet. Dylan is at a folding table near Hangar 47, reconciling tool tags from Echo 12 against maintenance logs, pointing out a wrench that swapped racks without paperwork. It seems small until Julia connects the time stamp to a gap in the camera feed outside the service door. Another stitch in the map. By late morning, ops is smooth. The beacon out at the dry lake is dead and tagged, photos of the piggyback line sit in a folder with a time stamp and a lat long. The van on the North Road rides a tow to a secured bay under a tarp and 4 seals. The drone cart rests under Dylan's thermal blanket with a big red, "Do not touch," taped across it in marker. Paperwork grows teeth, it will eat anyone who reaches too close. The formal debrief starts at 1100 in the briefing room that still smells like marker ink and coffee. Caroline takes the front without a mic. She doesn't need volume. We're going to walk last night cleanly, she says. No hero stories. Just facts. She points to a timeline Julia has built on the wall. Dots mark when the first Echo appeared, when Callahan changed the timetable, when Echo 12's door opened, when the bandits broke, when the van moved, when Dylan's trap caught the courier drone, when MPs cuffed 3 people who believed fences work only on other people. Natalie adds 2 quick callouts on air maneuvers and what the jamming looked like from the seat. Ryan describes the moment he wanted to chase and didn't. He keeps it short. Dylan explains the trap with the cart like he's talking through a checklist, not bragging, just how he did it so the next person can do it, too. Questions land and get answered. Why hold the lure? Because controlling bait tells you who's hungry. Why starve the North Corridor? Because sight lines win fights before they start. Who turned the range power into a beacon? Investigation pending, but the crew that wired it didn't pull a permit. Why did the unknowns fly like they knew our blind spots? Because somebody sold them a diagram and assumed we'd never redraw it. At 12:30, the lead investigator asks for the room. Caroline nods and steps into the hall with Natalie and Julia. Ryan stays behind with Dylan, both of them reading their copies of the incident sheet like a test they want to pass on the first try. In the hall, Natalie lowers her voice. "You know they'll move you," she says. "Not a complaint, a forecast." "For a while," Caroline replies. "Enough to testify, enough to clean the rest of the mess." She glances at the window where the ramp heat wavers. "This place will run without me." Julia folds her arms, chin tilted. "It ran because you made people see what they'd trained themselves not to see. That doesn't go away with orders. Public Affairs drafts a statement, routine systems test and training, airspace integrity affirmed, no public risk, ongoing internal review. The line is technically true and functionally incomplete. Caroline approves it because the rest belongs in rooms with recorders and locked doors. She signs 3 more forms. Her signature is still the same as it was before the crash that wrote her off and pushed her into ghosthood. The difference now is where she puts it. Afternoon settles like a hand on a shoulder. Crews eat. Planes taxi for normal sorties. Ops cycles through a weather update and a minor radar glitch that turns out to be a loose connector Dylan fixes with a twist and a grin. The external team wheels their cases out at 1,500 and leaves 2 agents behind to sit on Echo 12 while the first warrants in the chain go warm. The MP captain brings Caroline a short memo. Callahan requested counsel. Counsel advised silence. Whitfield tried to bargain and accidentally confirmed 2 dates and a bank transfer. Paper speaks when people won't. Near 1600, Caroline walks alone to Hangar 47. The B-21 Raider prototype sits quiet under even light, skin dull and dangerous. She puts a hand on the ladder rail and breathes in the smell of hydraulic fluid and hot aluminum, the scent stack that has framed most of her adult life. She climbs to the cockpit and slides into the seat she cleaned longer than anyone noticed. For a minute she says nothing. Then she keys a maintenance intercom. "Natalie," she says, eyes on the panel. "When this is over, you're getting the SIM profile for Sierra 7 back into rotation. It's not pretty, but it saves lives." Natalie answers from the floor without looking up from a checklist. "Already requested," she says. "Approved as of 10 minutes ago." Caroline smiles a tired, private smile that never reaches her mouth. Ryan appears at the bottom of the ladder with 2 waters. "Not coffee," he says. "Lesson learned." She takes one. "You learned 2 lessons," she says. "Don't chase, and bring water." He laughs once, quiet. "I can learn a 3rd. "Good," she says. "Learn when to shut up and debrief." He salutes with the bottle, half a joke, half a promise. As the sun tilts west, they hold a small formation on the apron. No speeches. No cameras. Just the people who stood the wall, pilots, techs, controllers, MPs, cleaners, cooks, the ones who don't catch headlines and keep the place alive. Caroline says the names of 6 pilots she carries and the room holds the silence like a weight it knows how to bear. "We do our jobs," she says. "We see the people who keep us upright. We don't mistake quiet for weak or dirty work for small work. You let that happen, you build the hole someone will crawl through later." Heads nod. The wind moves across uniforms, across coveralls, across the sleeves that hide patches and scars. At dusk, orders arrive. Temporary reassignment. Testimony schedule. Security escort. A replacement commander will take interim control of Nellis by morning. She will brief him at 0700, hand over a base that now knows where the seams were, and leave in a convoy that will not take the main gate. Natalie accepts acting operations authority for the night. Julia keeps the log open until the last signature is inked. Ryan draws the late sortie and flies it boring on purpose. Dylan locks Echo 12 with the external agent watching and checks every tag twice. Caroline returns to the small office someone cleared for her 6 hours earlier. On the desk, a sealed envelope with the command code authorization she used, an unsigned copy of her own death certificate from 3 years ago, and a fresh badge sleeve. She slides her old cleaner badge into the sleeve and tucks it behind the command credential. Both belong to her story. She keeps both. Before midnight, she makes one last loop. Ops hums at a lower pitch. Hangar 47 glows softer. The holding corridor is quiet now, lawyers have gone home to write motions they'll lose. Echo 12's camera LED blinks a patient heartbeat. On the apron, a young maintenance worker stands under a wing, hands in pockets, watching nothing in particular the way people do when they are trying to figure out where they fit. He is not Dylan, the base is full of versions of Dylan, but he wears the same look of almost being seen. Caroline catches his eye and gives him a small nod. Permission. Acknowledgement. A tiny door opens where none was marked. Back at Ops, Julia closes the last incident file and powers down one bank. Natalie signs the fuel sheet and leans back, muscles finally telling the truth. Ryan returns from the late flight and drops his helmet on a chair, hair damp, eyes clear. Uneventful, he says, and means it like a victory. Dylan appears with a clipboard and a smudge of grease on his cheek he won't notice until someone points it out later. The picture is ordinary on purpose. Caroline stands at the rail one last time. She speaks softly, to the people in the room and the ones who will hear the story in the spaces where stories travel. Here's what you remember, she says. You do the small things right. You don't talk over the quiet. You keep your tools where they belong. You tell the truth in the log. If someone treats you like furniture, you do your job so well the building falls without you. And when the room tilts, you put your hand on the rail and level it. Morning will bring the convoy, the handoff, the hearing rooms, the summaries written in careful language that leaves out the human parts. People will try to turn the night into a policy box and forget what gets lost when you don't look up. That's fine. The base remembers in other ways, in a ladder rail that has a new shine where a hand rested, in a rack with tags aligned, in a sim profile that found its way back into a syllabus, in a young lieutenant who now calls a break 2 beats earlier than he would have, in a tech who tapes a cable flat because he knows who might trip in a rush, in a cleaner who wipes the edge of a console and is greeted by name. Caroline steps away from the rail. She has done what she came to do. She walks toward the door the way she always walks, level, unhurried, seeing corners most people miss. Before she disappears into the hall, she looks back at the room that learned to see. Hold the wall, she says, and the words settle where orders can't reach. Then she goes, and the base keeps breathing, steady, stronger, awake to the power of the people no one bothered to see until they had to.